Welcome, I'm Izzy at Minerva. We're going to be looking at how to draft our very own bespoke anorak today, and this is what it's going to look like over here. As you can see, we are going to have quite a loose fitting anorak. It's going to have a really nice little hood which is going to come all the way over, really nice and kind of come up at the front as well to give us a bit of protection from the wind and the rain. We're going to have a central zip at the front, but then it's just going to be a pull on and over our head, a bit like a glorified jumper, but really it's an anorak, so it's an outdoor garment. There are quite a few fun little pattern drafting techniques in this which we've not shown you in previous videos, so I'm really excited to be getting straight on into the design with you today. To follow along today, you're going to need your pattern drafting tools listed right here, and if you've not drafted your own coat block, you can do that referring to previous videos which we've filmed, which look at how to measure your body and how to draft your own coat block as well. In today's video, I am only going to be showing you the pattern drafting techniques. We're not going to create a fully lined garment or anything like that. This series is just looking at how to pattern and draft. Now, what we're going to be doing today is drafting out this coat and figuring out all the shapes that we need in order to create the pattern pieces. And then I'm going to sew up a nice little toile so we can check and see what it looks like. That's always the starting point for any pattern design. And then at that point, once you're happy with sort of how the outer shell is looking, how the outer garment's looking and draping, then you can add the extra bits like the linings and any other facings and features that you want to. So that's what we're going to be doing today. Really excited about this one. So let's get straight on into it. So in front of me here, I've got my coat block. This is my front and the back. There's just a nice straight side seam that I've then joined together. Now, because this is a loose fitting garment, we are going to need to lower the arm side and also widen it to give us a little bit of volume. There are quite a few steps involved with this process, so let's do it together now. In today's video, I'm going to be using a nice Sharpie pen. This is really quite a fat pen, and if you're working at home, please do use a nice sharp pencil on your block. You're going to want to trace over your coat block to start off with, and then come and join me as we start making loads of changes to it. First thing we want to do is to add 4 centimeters into the side seam. So add a piece of paper in between the two, and then just draw a line that is 4 centimeters offset from the side seam. Then grab your coat back and just line it up beautifully. Stick them both together. Next, draw in your new side seam. Mark a point 2.5 centimeters below the arm side, and then just square out to either side to provide your new lowered arm side depth. And then very simply, we're just going to draw in a nice curve down to that point there from our pitch points, which are up here. So let's just find a nice soft curve, and the same on this side. Okay, next what we want to do is to grab our sleeve pattern pieces, because whatever change we've made to the arm side, we also need to make to the sleeve head. Obviously we've widened it here, so we effectively need to widen it under the sleeve arm here. So that's the first thing that we're going to do. So grab your ruler and just draw a line right down from the center notch all the way down the underarm sleeve, and then cut along that line. Add a piece of paper in between the two pattern pieces and just extend the gap to be 4 centimeters wider, and that's just to match up with what you did here. Next, we want to lower this arm side by half the amount that we lowered up here. So here it was 2.5 centimeters, so down here we're just going to lower it by 1.25 and then just square across. Now at this point you should have your pitch point at the front and also at the back down here. So the back pitch point is also here at that point. What we want to do is to make sure that the length of the sleeve is matching the length of the arm side here. So previously our pitch point went from here, just working nicely together to that point, and they tied in beautifully. However, we've now lowered the depth of the arm side, so we now need to make changes to the sleeve. So now it's got longer here, it's got deeper and it's got longer, so measure that new length. Grab a tape measure and just walk it along that new distance, and it needs to go all the way to the center line here. Okay, and effectively then what we want to do is to find a curve that is the same length at this point here. So for me, I need a curve that's 18 centimetres long. So I'm just going to find the midpoint, which is 2 centimetres along. And then effectively, I just want to find a curve and draw in a nice new curve that represents the shape that I just found on my tape measure. So on my tape measure, 18 centimetres down to there was looking something like that. Yeah, that's almost just about perfect. So let's just draw that in. So that's going to be my new underarm from the back. And just repeat that process for the front. So just measure it out. What is it now? All the way to the centre seam, 12 centimetres. And here we've got this little bit down here which represents the front as well. So for me it was 12.5, but the distance across there is 2 centimetres. So the length of the curve here is going to be 12.5 minus the 2 centimetres we've got here. So 10.5 in total, or there or thereabouts. So yeah, we're wanting a nice curve on this side too. At this point we can just cut out the curves of the armhole and also the armscye, just like that. So the only thing left to do is that we've widened the sleeve down here by 4 centimetres. However, we don't necessarily want a sleeve that has got a cuff that is 4 centimetres wider. It's going to look quite bulky on us potentially. So let's bring that in now. Mark a point that's 2 centimetres offset from the edge of the sleeve here, and likewise on this side. And then just really simply just find that nice soft curve that's going to bring us back up to our sleeve up here in a really nice gentle way. And then just cut out those shapes. And that is your sleeve pieces completely done. Let's move on back to our main coat body pattern piece now and continue our drafting of that aspect. Okay, the next thing I want to do is to remove this dart and just rotate it round to the bust line right here. So let's cut out the volume of the dart to start off with. Then I'm just going to cut straight along this bust line here, leaving a pivot point at the apex. Remove the volume of the original dart and just close it up. Find the centre point of this new dart here and just draw a little centre line all the way down to the apex. I'm then just going to offset my dart by 3 centimetres away from the apex and just draw in my new dart legs. Lovely. Okay, and that becomes our new dart. Next, we're going to separate the body from the top in order that we can then sort of create these two front parts at the front with the zip up the front, but the bottom is all intact. So cut along those side seams and along the waistline to create that separate shape. Now, the next thing I'm going to look at is how to create that zip up opening at the front. So let's look at that next. If this is the centre front, this is the line where we want our zip to be. Now, the first thing we want to do is to remove half of the width of our zipper teeth so that it doesn't become too bulky, because the teeth will sit like right in the front. So I'm going to be using a zip like this, and as you can see, the zipper teeth, the width of them is 5 millimetres wide. So if I want the zipper teeth to sit right in the centre of the centre front, I need to remove 2.5 millimetres away from the centre front to accommodate that extra volume that the zip is going to add in. And just to keep things a little bit more simple, I'm actually just going to remove 3 millimetres. So just cut off that excess. Now the next thing we want to do is to mark how wide a facing we want, and I think that our facing is going to be about 3 centimetres wide. So just mark a little dashed line on your pattern piece that is 3 centimetres offset from that new centre front line on this piece. And we just want to annotate it to say right coat cut here. Just simplify this top neckline up here so it's straight across at that facing effectively, and then just find a nice soft curve. We're just going to send it back up to that shoulder point up there. And once you find that curve, just cut it out. So all I'm going to do now is just draw in my new placket shape. So my placket, half of my placket is 3 centimetres wide, but it's going to double over. So I'm just going to draw a little rectangle that is 6 centimetres wide by the height that I've got here. Now currently the height is this height, however it will extend up higher once we've done our hood. The next thing I want to do is just to draw in the little bit of facing, which is this bit. So on the right hand side of the coat, we want to attach in a little strip of fabric, which is 3 centimeters wide, to allow us then to sew the zip onto it. And so we want to cut 2 of these. So we just want to draw out that shape one more time. So we know that we want to draw a rectangle that is 3 centimeters deep, and we know that we're going to need to cut 2 of these. Just going to say this is the facing right side, and we need to cut 2 of these actually. So, and this one is going to be cut 1 on fold, just so we don't forget. There's lots of little rectangles happening on this pattern drafting thing, isn't there? So we just need to make sure that we label them up so we don't forget which piece is for what. Now, at the risk of the seam allowance getting a little bit bulky, all I'm going to do then is just add a little flap onto the bottom so we can sort of encase that all together, and then it makes a nice neat flap down the bottom. You could at this stage also add some pockets if you wanted to, really easily. You could just draft those in really simply by creating like a nice little line down here and then effectively doubling that up. However, I'm not going to do that today, because that's quite an easy pattern drafting thing that you can do. But I do want to create this nice little waterproof flap. So our placket was 6 centimeters wide. So I'm just going to draw a line that's parallel to the top, the cut line up here at 6 centimeters. And this is just going to represent a nice little flap that we can sew into the garment and just keep it a little bit more waterproof. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is draft out the hood. There's a couple of things that we need from our front and also from our back in order to draft this out. We do also need to make one small change to our neckline, which is we just want to widen it slightly. This is really common when you add a hood onto a garment, and the coat block is already quite generous around the neckline anyway. And here we have already lowered it down slightly, but I'm just going to widen it now at the front and also at the back now that we've got the 2 pieces together. So all I'm going to do is just widen it by 1.5 centimeters, so mark a little 1.5 centimeter offset there, and then you can see actually that's creating a much nicer, softer curve now into the front panel here. You can just cut that out in a minute, but while we're here, whatever we've done to the front, we also need to do to the back. So just mark a point 1.5 centimeters away from the neckline there, and then find a nice curve. I'm just going to come right into that nape point at the back there. Great. So let's just cut away those changes on our blocks. Okay, next we need to measure this distance. So grab your tape measure, and starting at the new centre front, obviously we've trimmed it back for our zip a little bit. We know that's 3 to the cut line. Just measure all the way along. So for me, that measurement is 13.5 centimeters. And on the back, my measurement here is 10 centimeters. Okay, so to start by drawing our hood pattern piece, we want to take our nape to waist measurement, which for me is 40 centimeters. Now for you, that'll be something different, or it could be 40, or it could be there or thereabouts. If you don't know how to do that measurement on your body, your nape to waist, you can refer back to our video where we talked about how to draft your own coat, because you'll have been shown how to do that there. So tap in your nape to waist measurement, times that by 0.75 to get 3/4 of the length of it, and then just add 6 centimeters. Draw a line that is that long straight up your sheet of paper. Next, add your front neckline, for me 13.5, to your back neckline, which for me is 10, and we're just going to square off that line at the top and the bottom by the length you've got on your calculator. Extend this line here down by another 3.5 centimeters, and then draw a line from that point back up to your nice little rectangle. Next, take your back neckline measurement, which is for me 10 centimeters, and just mark that distance along the line you've just drawn. So that's a nice little help point right there. And then halfway along that line, just mark another little help point, which is just 5 millimeters, half a centimeter, above that line. And again, from that help point down to the end down here, just mark an approximate halfway point and then mark another help point 1 centimetre below. So you've got a nice little cross there, a nice little cross here, and then we're just going to join those together with a lovely soft curve. Okay, tap the measurement from here to here at the top of your little rectangle into your calculator, divide it by 5, and then mark that distance away from the point up here. So we're just marking 1/5 of the distance away from the top right hand corner. And then just square all the way down. Next, find the halfway point between these 2 points here and just mark it on the line there. Next, just measure this distance down here again, tap it into your calculator and just divide it by 4. Then add 2 centimetres, and whatever that distance is, just mark it down the line from the top left-hand corner. And then just offset a point that is 3 centimetres offset from that little help point that you made just there. Mark another little help point down here, 2 centimetres offset from the top, and then 2 centimetres out. We're now going to draw in the curve from here up to there, all the way around, and then coming back to this point. You may want to sort of draft that out with a pencil a couple of times to make sure you've got a nice smooth curve before you draw it in for real. Find the halfway point between down here and up here and just mark it on the line. And then, because we want the hood to kind of come quite high up and give us lots of nice neat coverage, I'm then going to raise that neckline up by 7 centimetres. So mark a point up here that is 7 centimetres above your bottom line down there. Working from that help point there, just annotate and mark a straight line out 3 centimetres away from that centre front line effectively, and then just continue that curve down to that point and just straighten it off at that point there. We also want to annotate on this pattern piece that at this point here, this is where we're then going to cut off the right side of the coat at that point, the right side of the hood I mean. So just annotate it to say right side cut here, and that then corresponds with this over here. And while we're looking at this placket, this top here, we want the placket and the zip to go all the way up to the top. So what we know is that here we raised it by 7 centimetres. So correspondingly, all I'm going to do is to raise my placket and my facing by 7 centimetres. We now need to draw in the gusset, which goes down the centre front of the hood. We've got the 2 little sides of the hood. So first of all, we want to measure the length of your new curve of your hood. Draw a rectangle that is that length. So for me, it was 56.5, and the width is 9 centimetres. Next, tap in the length of your gusset into your calculator and just divide it by 3. Mark that distance down from the top and just square across. Next up at the top up here, mark a point 1.5 centimetres in on both sides and the same down at the bottom down here, 1.5 centimetres. And then very simply, just find a curve and draw in your gusset from the bottom. Using your little help points as a guide and making sure by the time you hit up here it's nice and straight. And there we have it, our hood and our hood gusset. Brilliant. Okay, we've done some fantastic pattern drafting there. It's time now to create our pattern pieces, so we're going to do that next. Okay, let's start off by creating the pattern pieces for our hood pieces. So on the hood, I've added a seam allowance everywhere where it's going to attach onto something else, except for at the front because I've not added a facing. If you were going to add facing, you'd add a seam allowance there and do the facing, the lining and everything else. But for the sake of this video, obviously we're just doing the pattern drafting technique and checking to see what it looks like. So we've not added a seam allowance there, but we have to the sides because the sides are going to be attaching onto the facing and placket. And then I have also done a 1.5 centimetre seam allowance offset from that cut here line, because that is actually where we want to cut, because we need the seam allowance to attach onto the facing. and also the placket, the extended placket. So those are all done. Grain line follows the centre front effectively on this one, and it just runs straight down the centre of the gusset. The gusset, again, I've just annotated top and bottom, so the top represents this bit here, no seam allowance there, and the neck is going to tie into the neck, which will then tie into the body. Okay, so our facing, we just added a seam allowance all the way around the perimeter and a grain line that follows the centre front effectively. We're going to cut 2 of those, and then on our placket piece we're just going to cut 1 on the fold as we sort of drafted out, and we've extended it up and down at the bottom as well, so it can tie into the bottom of the jacket, the coat, and also so that it can be finished off really nicely and neatly up at the top. Okay, and then for the front pattern piece, we have got our right side line cut here, 1.5 centimetres offset from our line on our block, which annotated where we needed it to finish. And that's so it can attach on to the facings and the placket. And then the rest of it is just a 1.5 centimetre seam allowance around the rest of the perimeter, adding in our little dart and annotating our grain line. Brilliant, let's move on. Our next pattern piece will just be our back. And this is what it's going to look like. So we've not added a seam allowance to the bottom because we're not doing a hem, we're not finishing it. And we have added a seam allowance around the perimeter, and we're going to place it on the fold. Grain line follows the centre back. Okay, let's now move on to our front bottom piece. Okay, so this is our anorak front bottom. We're going to cut 1 on folds, and our grain line runs parallel with our centre front. Okay, the next piece to do is this little waterproof flap piece. Obviously it's got to be cut on the fold, but it also needs to be like doubled over so that it's right sides together on both sides of the little flap. So we want to add a seam allowance up here, along the top line up here, and then we just want to extend it to be double the length, so double the width. So the width here is 7.5 times 2 is 15. So I'm just going to extend it down to 15 centimetres and square. Add in a little dash line to say where the fold is going to be. Add your seam allowance to the side, and then just annotate to say this is supposed to be placed on the fold. Grain line runs parallel with the centre front, and this is our waterproof flap, cut 1 on fold. Okay, and our final pattern pieces are our sleeves. And then this is our top sleeve and our undersleeve. Grain line just runs perpendicular to the elbow line. We've added in our notches and, oh, just this one down here. And that's all looking really good. Take a screen grab of any of these if you need a little bit more time just to review them, and then we're going to start sewing. Great, now that we've created our pieces out of tracing paper, let's go and start sewing them up together. I'll be sewing them up using some calico, which we'll tag below the video for you, so you can find it on our Minerva website if you'd like to duplicate this. Obviously I'm just using calico and not waterproof fabric, so we're just sewing it up to check the shape and to make sure it fits really nicely. We'll start off by prepping the hood pattern piece, and on this one here, remember that we need to cut the right side and trim it down. If this is the right side facing up, this one will be on my right side of my head. So I'm just going to trim this side down. Next, take the gusset and we're going to pin it to the curve of the hood. So just pick one side first and pin it all the way around. Great, just like that. And then we can sew that side together. As always with this series, I'm using dark coloured thread just to ensure that you can see it on the screen above. I'm also using a slightly longer stitch length of 3 or 3.5 long, just so that I can easily unpick it if I need to do some fitting once I've sewn my toile. Pin and sew the other side as well to the gusset, and then that's the hood done. The next thing to do is to prepare your front pieces just by sewing the dart into the arm side. So we've got a nice front dart that's just coming in really nicely and evenly across this chunk here, which was exactly how we wanted it. So I'm really happy with that, it's looking good. Next, take the back pattern piece and attach the front at the shoulders just by pinning and sewing using your standard seam allowance. Repeat for the other side. Next, we've got our coat body here and we've got our hood, which we're going to attach right sides together. So we're just going to pin all the way along the entire neckline, attaching the hood to the body. Now, there is a reasonable amount of ease in the hood, which means that you're going to have to pin really carefully all the way around just to make sure it's going to fit really nicely into the neckline. And that's completely normal because the neck is a curve. So don't worry if you've got a bit of excess that you need to sort of pin in place. Wonderful. Once you've pinned it in place, let's just go and sew it using a standard seam allowance. Okay, we've got a couple more steps to do along the front. Now, the first thing we want to do is actually to get our zip into both of these pieces. We want this side to go onto this one, obviously, but on this side, what we actually want to do is to encase the zip into our right facing first, and then effectively lay the right placket on top to then create this nice little flap that goes over the top like that. Really nice. So that's where we're going and that's what we're aiming for. So to start off with, we'll attach this side of the zip to this one just to keep it nice and simple. So with right sides together, right side of the zip and the right side of the fabric, just pin and then sew the zip side in place. Once you've pinned that side in place, we're then going to pin the facing, the other side of the zip to the facing here. So we've got two facing pieces. The right sides are up on the screen right now. We're going to line this one up here and just make sure the top of the zip is at the top of the facing and just pin that in place. You want the zipper teeth to, the center of the zipper teeth to be 1.5 centimeters away from the raw edge. So let's get those two sewn together now. I'm just going to use a standard zipper foot just like this. Wonderful. Once you've got that far and you've tacked this one in place, you've sewn that in place there, it's looking good. On this side, we then want to put right sides together, so we're sandwiching the teeth of the zip in between the two layers of fabric with the right sides together. So just stitch that in place. Lovely. Okay, so now we've got this lovely bit all nicely sandwiched in place. You may just want to press that away, the fabric away from the zip so it doesn't catch when you do it up at the front here. Okay, I've got my placket piece here, and the first thing I want to do is fold it right sides together and just stitch a 1.5 centimeter seam allowance along the top up here. Then just turn it right side out and press it in place. Brilliant. And then we're going to get the raw edges of the placket and line it up and baste in place along the raw edges of the right side of the jacket. Now the folded finished edge is up at the top. Excellent. And then grab the zip and just lay it on top, and then we're going to pin it in place and then sew using our standard seam allowance again. Okay, lovely. It's looking so good now, isn't it? With that lovely little flap. It's going to zip up beautifully. Let's give it a go and see. So there it is, all zipped up, and there's that lovely little flap that's going to go over and just look so good. Now at this point you could install some little poppers down here if you wanted to for the anorak. But what we're going to do next is actually, now that we've done the entire bit of the front, I'm just going to attach the bottom onto it. The next thing we want to do is to grab our waterproof flap, which we've cut and then folded along the fold line, and we just want to sandwich this and place it onto the top of the front coat here like this. Just pop a few pins in place, making sure that your placket is sitting really nice and flat as you pin it in place. Then just grab the nice big rectangle of the front bottom piece, and with the right sides together, just sandwich all of that together. And then just sew together using your 1.5 centimeter seam allowance. Great, and once you've done that, once you open it up, you've then got this really lovely, neat finish of your placket with your front, and that's just overlapping absolutely beautifully, so you can open up your coat and it's looking really good. Now you can imagine at this point, this is what I was talking about putting pockets in here. So if you added like an extra piece of fabric on top with your pockets, you've got some really fun little design solutions there. Go and press all those seams in place now. The next thing we want to do is just to put the right side of the back over the right side of the front and sew, pin and sew those side seams together, just like that. The next thing we've done is then just sew those two sleeve pieces together. So you've got two lovely, nice sleeves. Make sure you know where the back is. The back is the longer side. This has got the shorter seam at the front and the longer seam at the back. And then what we need to do is, with right sides together, we're just going to attach the sleeves to the anorak body, and we're just going to pin and sew that in place. If you're not sure how to do this and need a bit more extra support, feel free to refer back to our pattern drafting video where I talked you through how to sew the original block of the coat, and you can take a little look at that for further support. Here's our anoraks, looking very different from some of the other coats that we've created, isn't it? I really like the shape that we've got here with that zip opening, which is just looking really nice. And the hood is a great little detail as well. Obviously really essential for the wet and rainy weather here in the UK. I hope you found that really helpful and interesting. There's lots of good little techniques in that, aren't there? And it's been really fun to sew it up. So thank you for joining me today. As always, please do subscribe to our Minerva YouTube channel. There are loads of amazing videos on that channel so that you can use to learn and to level up your sewing skills, including the pattern drafting course and lots of learn how to sew and lots of different techniques. So thank you for joining me today as we've learned how to create a really nice, simple anorak shape. I hope you've really enjoyed that, and I'll see you next time.